Coming up, as Formula 2 prepares to get back to racing ways, we'll catch up with championship leader Oscar Piastri. IndyCar's Alexander Rossi tells us what it takes to win the Baja 1000, and after Shane van Gisbergen won the Supercars title, we'll get the lowdown on what's going down under with Emma Notarfrancesco. And after the Qatar Grand Prix, with just 2 races of the F1 season left, we'll talk to GP Racing's Stuart Codling. All that and more coming your way this week on this week's episode of This Week. Hello then folks, and welcome to This Week with Will Buxton. This is This Week. I am Will Buxton, and here is where we talk about the week's racing news. And we're going to start, like we always start, in the world of Formula 1, because the Qatar Grand Prix has been and gone, the inaugural race at the Losail International Circuit, and it was far more exciting than I think a lot of people had envisaged it would be. It started, of course, with the fallout from the Brazilian Grand Prix, because Mercedes announced that they would be attempting to have a right to review over the non-penalty for Max Verstappen for his move in defending his position from Lewis Hamilton 1 week earlier. In the end, that right to a review was denied, because although Mercedes had a new piece of evidence in the form of the forward-facing camera, easy for me to say, it was held to be new evidence, but not substantial enough to merit a right to review, so that was denied. As the weekend progressed, it became very evident, very fast, that Mercedes had an advantage in Qatar. Lewis Hamilton looking dominant throughout and easily taking pole position. Max Verstappen, though, trying to get on terms with him in qualifying, was handed a grid penalty for ignoring double-waved yellows in the final moments of qualifying, as Pierre Gasly's AlphaTauri shredded its right front tyre after a wing failure. The circuit, whilst being a relatively new circuit, and it's been built within the last 20 years, has very severe curbs for Formula 1 cars, and we saw them tearing themselves apart throughout the weekend, ultimately also creating a number of tyre issues which affected a number of drivers during the race itself. It was a race in which Lewis Hamilton never really looked all that concerned or bothered by anybody else. He has been on almost untouchable form since that grid penalty, that disqualification just before the sprint in Brazil, and duly notched up another win. But Max Verstappen, in finishing second from that demoted grid spot of P7, another great race from him, has kept the gap as small as it could possibly be. 8 points as Max Verstappen took the extra point for fastest lap. 2 races remain. If Hamilton wins and takes fastest lap, they go to Abu Dhabi level on points. Verstappen can, however, be crowned champion in Qatar if the maths plays out, and he's 26 points or more ahead of Lewis Hamilton by the time we move to Qatar. The race was notable, as we said, for a number of flat tyres towards the end. The Williams drivers just running their tyres a little bit too far into the race, but that caused concern down at Alpine for Fernando Alonso, who was running in a brilliant 3rd place. In the end, a virtual safety that came out, a virtual safety car that came out. I'm doing well today. Towards the end of the race, ultimately allowed just to ease off a little bit, conserve a bit of life in his tyres, so he didn't have to worry in the final laps. But it was a thoroughly deserved return to the podium for the 40-year-old. Absolutely cracking stuff from Fernando Alonso. Wonderful to see him back on the podium. It was a good weekend again for Ferrari in their battle with McLaren. McLaren seriously struggling for pace these last few races as Ferrari screamed back into the points. But it was an exceptional weekend for Alpine. Alonso on the podium, Ocon in the points, and in their fight with AlphaTauri, because they arrived in Qatar level on points, Alpine have now stretched into what could be a decisive lead as the championship moves on to the final 2 races of the season in Saudi Arabia, a brand new track only recently completed, and to a heavily revised Abu Dhabi for the season finale. Both races taking place in December. Going to be fascinating to see how the season pans out. Let's move now to Formula 2, because Formula 2 gets back to racing ways in Saudi Arabia as support at the next Formula 1 event. Some driver news to tell you. Clement Novalak will make his debut in Saudi Arabia in Formula 2 and has signed a full 2022 deal to race with MP Motorsport. Meanwhile, Ralph Boschung will continue with Campos for the full season into 2022, and just announced this afternoon Ollie Caldwell will replace David Beckman at Campos starting in Saudi Arabia. But while we talk about Formula 2, we should talk to the championship leader. He's had an astonishing few years, having won Formula Renault 2 years ago, Formula 3 last year, and leading the Formula 2 championship this year. He has recently signed a deal to become the Alpine F1 team's reserve driver for 2022. He is one of the most talented drivers, and certainly with one of the finest pedigrees of recent years. It is Oscar Piastri, and he joins me now. Well, Oscar, first of all, congratulations on the news that you are going to be official reserve driver for the Alpine F1 team next season. I know you had your first weekend on, as you described it, work experience in Qatar, which went pretty well with a podium for the team.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very excited to increase my involvement with Alpine for next year. And yeah, my first weekend of work experience was good. Fernando actually called me his good luck charm, so it's a good thing I'm going to most of the races next year. But yeah, it was a good weekend, and obviously great to see the team have such a strong weekend and get back on the podium.
As you say, if you're Fernando's good luck charm, I think your focus, though, might be elsewhere in Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi. You've had the most incredible season in Formula 2. Actually, you've had the most incredible 3 years. I don't think there are many drivers in the world that have had the same run of success or consistency that you've had. Just talk to us a little bit, if you can, about what it's taken through COVID, through all the difficulties, and bouncing from from Formula Renault to Formula 3 to Formula 2 to just maintain that incredible level of performance that you've shown.
It's been a combination of things, really. I think my sort of last 3 seasons have actually been quite different, mainly in terms of my strengths on track. So Formula Renault, I was generally quite good in quali, and then the races were quite good. But in F3, it was sort of the opposite. My races were really my strength, and my quali was my weakness last year. And then this year feels like a bit of a culmination of both seasons put together, and my quali pace has been strong, and obviously our race pace has been good as well. So it's taken a lot of hard work. Obviously the last 2 years have been with Prema, and the previous year in Formula Renault was with our race. So going from a French team to an Italian team, although half the staff here is also French, that took some getting used to and gelling with the team. And then obviously, like you said, with COVID, that made not so much this year, but particularly last year, quite difficult because, we didn't know when we were going to go racing again. So having an indefinite wait as a racing car driver is never ideal. But yeah, clearly we weathered that storm pretty well. And, even this year, I still haven't gotten home since January. So it's been a long time away from home, and it's been, a big sacrifice. It's been a big sacrifice since I moved over to Europe 5 years ago. But yeah, it's clearly been paying off, I would say.
I think this is something that a lot of people maybe don't take fully into consideration over the last 2 years, is how hard life must be for you guys as Australians or New Zealanders, Antipodean racers who have not been able to go home, see friends, see family because of the restrictions that COVID have put in place. It's been the most severe, I think, for any racers around the world. When are you getting home? How big a hug are you going to be able to give your folks, man?
Yeah, it's. I think it's definitely thrown a big spanner in the works for the Aussies and the New Zealanders. I was speaking to Marcus Armstrong and Liam Lawson about sort of the restrictions for New Zealand, and I think both of them said they actually can't get home for Christmas this year, so they're not going to be able to go home at all. So fortunately, I'm in a bit of a better position than that. Australia, or Victoria anyway, where I live, have removed all their quarantine restrictions. So unlike last year where I had to spend Christmas Day in hotel quarantine, this year I can spend it with my family. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I should be going back after Abu Dhabi. And yeah, it'll be the first time I've been back since the end of January, because
Wow.
before that it was basically impossible to get back to Australia. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I think for all the Aussies and the Kiwis, it's been a pretty tough 2 years. It's tough enough for us anyway because it's so far away. But yeah, with COVID restrictions basically making it impossible for us to get back, it'll be very nice to get back for Christmas and be able to spend that with my family.
And I know you've got an early Christmas present in getting that Alpine role for next year, but how much would winning that F2 title mean for you? 2 weekends left, of course, 6 races across those 2, still locked in that fight with Guan Yu Zhou for the title.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's not just Joe in the title hunt. Roberts and Schwartzman's 7 points behind Joe, I think, and then Tictum's another 6 or 7 points behind that. So, it's not just Joe that I'm focusing on. And I think really I'm trying to focus on myself and just do what I've been doing and do what myself and the team have been doing for the whole year. I think getting the Alpine announcement out of the way for next year in some regards is very helpful. That was our plan, to have it all announced in this massive break, so that now I can go to Saudi and Abu Dhabi, fully focused on that. Nobody asking me questions about what my plans are. And now it's basically just for pride and to try and win another trophy, really. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think now that my plans are sorted, the pressure is more or less released. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and obviously 2 new tracks for everyone. So it should be a good end of the year.
I want to talk to you about those questions, that obviously came up about your future earlier on in the year. There was looking like there may be possibly the slimmest of chances. Did you ever allow yourself to believe that it could go Formula Renault champion, Formula 3 champion, Formula 2 champion, straight into Formula 1?
Well, I mean, if you look at the sort of ladder system that the FIA have created, I guess that's how it's supposed to go, really. So, I always kept hope that I could get to F1 for next season. Obviously, it's not panned out that way, but I think if I had have given up hope early on, then who knows what that would have done to my motivation. I basically knew since just after Silverstone that the chances of me getting to F1 for next year were incredibly low. But I never wanted to let myself, sort of dismiss F1 for next year or a race seat for next year. Just because I wanted to prove to people what I could do on track, and I think we've still done a very good job of that. And unfortunately, it's not quite been enough. But yeah, I never gave up hope, and I think that was pretty important to try and spur me on, certainly for Monza and Sochi, and obviously now my plans are sorted. So there's not really any pressure, and there's not really anything to prove anymore. I guess now it's purely just for enjoyment and to seal the deal, really, and get 3 titles in a row.
There was some talk that you might have been looking at IndyCar. I know with Callum Ilott heading over there, Christian Lundgaard. We've seen how well Romain Grosjean, Marcus Ericsson have done out there as well. Was that ever a serious consideration for next year?
No, I never considered IndyCar for next year. I think that was purely media speculation. I never had any plans to go to IndyCar. It looks like a great series, but at the moment I'm focused on getting to F1. So yeah, who knows? Maybe sometime in the future, but it was never a consideration for next year.
You've been in the press over the last few days because obviously Guan Yu Zhou got the last seat in Formula One. I know that you and he are kind of stablemates of a kind at the moment at Alpine, and you very much came to his defence because of some of the sort of the negative reaction from some on social media. I thought that was a really good thing that you did, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think we all know that motorsport is, quite heavily financially driven. And, I think the main point I was trying to get at is it's not Joe's fault that somebody's willing to back him to get to F1. It's his dream, and it's, for him commercially and for the sport financially, it's a massive boost. And, that is no fault of his own. And, his results, okay, you could argue it's his third season in F2, so he should be getting the results, but he's getting good results. He's second in the championship. It's not like he's, just struggling to get his super license or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, I thought some of the backlash was a bit unfair, and it's not something new either. So, yeah, I like Joe as well. He's a nice guy. So, I thought I'd stick up for him because, social media can be a pretty toxic place at the best of times. So, I just didn't want everything about him to be negative and, to help out a friend, basically.
That's incredibly gracious, man. Look, you have got this Alpine seat for next year. You yourself have dubbed it work experience. It's not going to be racing, but what will it involve for you next year? How busy are you going to be?
Very busy. So, I guess the nature of the reserve driver role is in the name. So for all the international races, all the flyway races, I'll be present at the track in case I'm needed. And then we're still working out the details for the European races. But at the moment, I think I'll be doing sim support for all the European weekends. So on the Friday, doing correlation work from the track. And then we're putting together a big testing program in the current car. So because the regulations are changing next year, we're allowed to use the current car. Normally it has to be 2 years old. But yeah, so whilst I won't be racing, most likely, I'm still going to be doing quite a lot of testing in an F1 car, which is still pretty cool to think about. And, it's a big show of faith from Alpine's side that they're willing to back this testing program in particular. So I think that speaks volumes about their commitment to me and also my commitment to them.
Alpine are also heavily involved, obviously, in the World Endurance Championship with Hypercar. Is there any chance, and I know it probably won't work out that way because in fact, I think all of the World Endurance Championship races next year clash with F1 races. Any chance we might see you racing for Alpine at Le Mans at some point?
Next year, I don't think so. I think they've said they're going to enter. I don't think they're entering Hypercar. I think it's LMDH. So definitely not for next year, I would say. Like you said, I mean, I don't know what the calendar looks like for next year for WEC or for Le Mans, but if it clashes with any of my other commitments, then the F1 commitments will take priority. Firstly, from Alpine's perspective, that's what they're paying me for next year. And also from my own point of view, I want to be fully focused on F1 and sort of not have any distractions or miss out on any potential opportunities because, with COVID still lingering around, you never know when you might get the call up for F1. So yeah, probably no endurance stuff next year, I would say.
Good stuff, man. Well, look, it's been such a joy watching you develop, watching you grow, watching you race. The run of form, as I said at the top of this, that you've been on, I can't think of another driver in the world who is performing at the level that you are consistently year in, year out as you grow and you learn and you become the phenomenal racing driver that you are. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I can't wait to see how the final 2 weekends work out for you and if you can cap off these amazing 3 years in the way that you deserve to. But thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much, Will. Cheers for having me.
In World Superbikes, friend of the show, Toprak Ratsgatlioglu is World Superbike champion. His first title came on a weekend where he finished P2 to Jonathan Rea in race 1 in Indonesia, and it was a thrilling first race in Indonesia. Slightly damp, wicked fight back. Rea taking the victory by less than a second. Great contest. In race 2, Rea fended off Scott Redding in torrential rain, but for the title, it was already done. It was already decided. It was Toprak's year, and thoroughly deserved. It's been a real joy watching Toprak race this year in World Superbikes. The world very much at his feet. We move now stateside to IndyCar. The new Detroit layout, which has had a bit of a bashing from certain quarters, has been dubbed fantastic for racing by Joseph Newgarden, who was doing sort of a PR spiel there at the city. So we wait to see how good it is, but certainly some positivity coming out of Joseph, who knows a thing or two about racing and race tracks. Other IndyCar news for you. Stoffel Van Dorn and Nick De Vries, teammates for Mercedes in Formula E, will both be testing IndyCar in December at Sebring. Van Dorn will be testing for McLaren, of course, the team he used to race for in Formula One. Nick De Vries will be testing for Meyer Shank. Will that lead to a full-time move or opportunities? We wait and see, but really interesting to see those two incredibly talented drivers testing over there in the States. News breaking today while we're on a kind of an IndyCar Formula E crossover. Oliver Askew will join Andretti in Formula E next season. He, of course, won the 2019 Indy Lights title for Andretti. And just breaking, literally just now, NIO have announced a new team principal in Alex Hui, who replaces Christian Silk. Now, let's revert to Formula E to IndyCar a little bit, kind of. Well, keep it stateside. Baja 1000, nothing to do with IndyCar, or is it? A little bit. Rob McCarron, Rob McCracken, sorry. And I'm terrible with names. And Luke McMillan won the Baja 1000 overall in the Stadium Super Trucks category. But there were big headlines as well in the Baja 1000 because Alexander Rossi, IndyCar star, you see that's how we did the crossover, or attempted to do the crossover, won in his class, Class 7. Now, he is the first Indy 500 champion to win at Baja. Many have tried to do so, and all have failed. Amongst them, the likes of Parnelli Jones and Rick Mears, and just to name two. Rossi, who won the Daytona 24 earlier this year, now has just the most incredible CV of race wins across different championships. A phenomenal job from him in a very different discipline. And as we said at the top of the show, really happy that Alex can join me on the phone now. Now, you've managed to achieve, Alexander Rossi, something that I don't think anybody else ever has. You've won Daytona, you've won the Indy 500, and now you've won at Baja. What an amazing way to cap off the year for you, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the advantage of doing some of these extracurricular events is that when everything else is kind of going to hell sometimes, you have the opportunity to either start or end the season on a high. And I was able to do that, obviously, with Daytona back in January and Baja last week or a couple days ago. So, it's all because of Honda and my relationship with HBD and their kind of diversity that they have, which I think is so unique for a manufacturer in this day and age, which has allowed me to kind of add that to my resume.
Now, for those that don't know, explain Baja, explain the intensity, the difficulty of what that race represents.
Yeah, it's really hard to explain. It's something that I'm still trying to get to grips with, even though I just finished my third attempt at it. It's a race. I think the easiest way to explain it is it's a race that could really only take place in Mexico, in terms of the fact that the diversity of the terrain that exists there, especially on this race that we just had. So it was a point-to-point race down the peninsula, which started in Ensenada, which is just south of kind of San Diego in California. and then it ends pretty much in Cabo. So it's 1,200 plus miles, and you have all sorts of terrain from really single track kind of goat trails through the mountains to you're literally on sand next to the ocean. You've got kind of flat lands, kind of these big open valley spaces that honestly, are 50 miles from civilization and looks like you're driving on another planet. Like it's really hard to put into words kind of the difference of terrain, but then also the element of risk that is associated with the race. Just because there's so much of it, as much prep and as much time that you take down there prior to the event, most of the course that you're driving is kind of just based on what you see, right? You're not going to memorize hundreds of miles of terrain and corners and braking zones and all this sort of thing. So you're constantly trying to analyze what you see in front of you and judge, the speed that the truck can go over those rocks or those whoops, whether that's 120 miles an hour, whether that's 40 miles an hour. And you're always kind of having to base, what the capability of the truck is kind of on the terrain that you're seeing and trying to predict that as best as you can. And then you add in the element of nighttime, you add in the element of fog as you go from kind of the valley over the mountains to the coast. In the middle of the night, you add in other trucks, cars, dirt bikes, dust. You add in fans that are just camping on the side of the track, on the outside of corners, running across the track, digging ditches in the track to try and trap you. You're dealing with other competitors, obviously, through this whole time. You deal with a huge lack of visibility. So yeah, it's everything that you think would be a challenge in motorsports, all kind of combined into one event. So it's an amazing thing to be able to get to do. I kind of fell in love with off-road racing from the very first moment I was introduced to it in 2018. And I love this event. I'm glad that we were able to win our class this year, so I don't really have to think about it, and I can take a break from it for a couple of years, because it's hard not to think about kind of the risks that you're taking the whole time. It's incredibly fast with very none to little kind of safety elements other than what's built into the truck. So a huge amount of respect gained for those guys that this is their career and this is what they do, and meeting the guys that have won 11 Baja 1000s and all that sort of thing is amazing. And then, the guys that do it on motorcycles and quads, it's another level of crazy.
How do you prep for it? Because open wheel, you can jump into a simulator, you can go testing, comparatively, it's pretty easy. For this, how on earth do you get yourself into a space where you're ready for that kind of a challenge?
Well, so usually the course is released kind of a month prior to the race, and in a perfect world, you'd go down there. Obviously, you as an individual aren't doing the whole 1,200 miles. There are guys that do, but in the kind of top levels, you share the truck with other drivers. So you had your section, which is whatever 300 to 400 miles, and you'll spend kind of, in a perfect world, a week down there, and you'll run your section multiple times, and you'll get to mark down kind of dangers, right? Whether that's a G out, whether that's rocks, whether that's a cliff to one side, whether that's silt, which is a super talcum powder-like sand that you can get stuck in, whether it's cactus, whatever, right? And you mark those things down. Unfortunately, when we went down there to do this prep work, the truck that we took down there failed 60 miles into our 300-mile adventure. So we did none. So 80% of the course that I had to race on Friday, we had never seen before. So that was another part. We didn't have anything in our GPS. It was marked danger. So we had to guess and hope and pray that there wasn't anything too crazy there, and kind of just drive what you see, which is always a little bit of a challenge.
A huge challenge. The logical question, the next question has to be, you've done Baja. What about Dakar?
Yeah, that's certainly something that I would want to do at some point. The scheduling of it's a little bit difficult, just because you're getting really close to the start of IndyCar testing and everything from that standpoint. And all of what I've done, it's been with the mindset of nothing can take away from the IndyCar program,
Sure.
from a time or kind of availability standpoint. So that one's going to be tough. I think the biggest thing for me this year is I don't plan on doing really anything outside of Daytona, the 24-hour in January. But the big thing that I want to go do again is Bathurst, just because that was honestly an embarrassment. We bit off way more than we could chew in terms of trying to learn a V8 supercar at Bathurst. That's a tall order. So I think going back now with at least having, some circuit knowledge would help, and we'd hit the ground running in a much better position. So I'd say that's kind of the next big thing that I'd want to go back and do again.
You're proving your versatility year in, year out. I remember many years ago when you were with the Caterham F1 team and we went to the Nordschleife and you were in a little Caterham, little Super 7 thing, and you did one recon lap on the Nordschleife and then took me for a spin, and you were full tilt. Like, it was so impressive. You talk about doing the Baja and just having to react to everything that's in front of you. Your versatility, your adaptability has always been something that has really stood you out. Is there anything beyond Bathurst? I say beyond Bathurst, I mean, that's a whole nother game entirely. Is there anything beyond all of that you want to contend with next? I mean, obviously taking IndyCar into consideration, but is there anything crazy out there you want to do?
I think that's, I think Baja was kind of the outer edge of where I felt that I could still be effective. I look at, we use Jimmy Johnson as a great example of kind of his transition and what he's gone through trying to come to IndyCar. I can relate to that a little bit with me trying to do the V8 thing. Like, that's it's a little bit better version of a cup car, but ultimately it's kind of the same physics behind it. So I don't think NASCAR would be something that I'd be well suited for. So that's not really something on my radar in the immediate future. I think really we ticked all the boxes that I was looking at in the past couple of years, and in a way that's good. We were able to do it. I will go back to Baja at one point. I definitely want to go challenge for an overall, victory in a trophy truck once I kind of mentally recover from this one. And but the focus and all the effort needs to go into the IndyCar program at this point. It's been a tough couple of years for various reasons, and that's ultimately what is going to be my defining career moments is in that championship. So it's a critical year for us coming up this year, and just want to make sure that everything is, all our eggs are in that basket.
Yeah, let's look at that. Obviously, as you say, you're going to defend Daytona, and huge congratulations on that. But that was the real kind of high point of the season up to Baja, I guess. What has not quite gone right for you guys and Andretti that hasn't seen you up to the level and competing at the level that I know you would want to be and would expect to be?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, it's a lot of different things. I think in short, and the easiest way to sum it all up is in 2020, we had the introduction of the aero screen, which certainly changes the car behavior and the car balance and performance, just with the center of gravity shift, the weight change, the weight distribution, all of that sort of thing. You couple that with COVID and a huge lack of testing and schedules getting disrupted and no one really knowing what was going on for the first half of the year. And so I think we as an organization at Andretti Autosport really struggled in the first half of 2020 with adapting, our car and me adapting my driving to the changes the aero screen was giving us. And I think the second half of 2020, we certainly turned a corner and we had 5 podiums in a row or something, and things started, we found what we thought was a pretty good baseline. And so then we go into 2021, and I think, we were just very excited and gung-ho about kind of just returning to how we were in previous years. and kind of just bouncing back from 2020. And I think we probably just tried too hard in a lot of respects. We had some things that were unlucky for sure. We got taken out before the race even started in Texas. We ran out of fuel on lap 30 in Indianapolis. There was a myriad of different reasons, but ultimately I think we were trying too hard to get the results, which was ultimately affecting our performance. So it all came from trying to recover from 2020. And you know how it goes. This sport is incredibly momentum based, and it's a mental game. And so when things are not going well, it's very easy to kind of continue on that trajectory downwards. So I think in a lot of respects, that's kind of the trap that we as a group fell into. And so going into 2022, there's no real, we went into 2021, we have to win the championship. There's nothing else that we care about. We're going into 2022, and it's just, let's get back to the victory lane and let's have fun doing what we're doing. And if we happen to be in the conversation for a championship at the end of the year, great. But we just need to start winning races again, and that's going to be our main priority.
And how much of a joy is it for you to, be part of an IndyCar series that is growing so rapidly? Its notoriety, not just within the United States, but around the world, is, I don't think I've ever seen it like this. You're in the middle of it, as it is, in one of the strongest places it's been in decades.
Yeah, I every day I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity, and that Michael gave me the opportunity back in 2016. I thought when the Manor program was ending for me at the end of 2016, I thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me in my life and my career. And ultimately, I think it was one of the best. I feel so at home in IndyCar. I think it's an amazing championship. I love everything that there is to it. And I think to see the respect that it's gaining worldwide is something that's really, really cool. And I think that everyone that comes over from Europe or from Formula One or whatever, they fall back in love with racing. In so many ways, Formula One is certainly the pinnacle, and it is, the best drivers and teams and manufacturers and tracks in the world. There's no question about that. But a very, very few get to actually enjoy, I think, the spoils of that. Whereas you come to IndyCar and every driver and team seemingly has a very similar opportunity to go out there and compete and win. And there's something to be said for that. That's what we all fell in love with as young kids in go-karts, is going out on the weekend and trying to win and standing on the top step of the podium and getting that competitive satisfaction, getting that competitive nature satisfied. So I love it. I wouldn't change anything, and can't wait to see what the future brings.
Lovely stuff, man. Well, hopefully I will see you at a race in 2022. Now that COVID restrictions and everything have died down, I'm hoping to get out to an IndyCar race next season, maybe even the 500, man. So have a great winter. Enjoy yourself. It's been lovely to chat, mate. Congratulations on topping and tailing the season, so fantastically. Just always incredibly proud and overjoyed to see you doing well, and hopefully I'll see you in 2022.
Right on, man. Thank you so much. Have a great holiday and enjoy these last couple of races. It's going to be exciting.
Thanks, man. In the World Rally Championship, Sébastien Ogier signed off his full-time career in the championship with another championship. It's 8 now for Sébastien Ogier, and he did it in style at the Rally Monza. And can we just take a moment to say, well, first of all, you look at this and you think, is that Monza? Is that Monza? And then you're like, oh, they're on the banking. I mean, if ever there was a fever location for a bit of rallying, the old Monza banking is truly it. The podium, of course, on the start-finish straight, and on that famous Monza podium, what a way for Seb Ogier to round out his career. Elfyn Evans gave it as good a fight as he could, said he couldn't have given it any more. But a great season, a great fight from Elfyn, and of course from Ogier, who with those 8 titles absolutely cements himself as one of the greats of all time. There were questions after Sébastien Loeb, would Ogier ever be able to move out of Loeb's shadow? But 8 wins, 8 championships. Truly one of the all-time greats. A phenomenal career. We move finally then, talking of great careers, talking of great years, we move to Supercars, and a guy we've been talking about for months and months and months and months and months, and he is the champion. Shane van Gisbergen, an amazing fight back for the win in race 1 of the 4th weekend in Sydney, but the remainder of the weekend after that race 1 was rained off. And so Van Gisbergen, with just the Bathurst 1000 remaining, is champion. Nobody can now beat him, and honestly, deservedly so. What a season. What an incredible tally of wins, up there with Jamie Whincup and McLaughlin, you know, as one of the most consistent winners, one of the most successful seasons, one of the most dominant seasons that we've seen in Supercars. Truly an astounding job. And there's nobody that I want to talk to more about Shane's win, about what's going down in Australia than my dear friend Emma Notarfrancesco. It's the middle of the night and she joins us from Melbourne. Well, Emma, thanks so much for joining me. A historic week, a historic season for Shane van Gisbergen. It seems like Supercars started... I mean, it seems like it started last year because it's been such an elongated, truncated season with all of the delays, with COVID. But, I mean, SVG, what a year he's had.
Oh, he's unreal. I mean, he started his season on a high, back-to-back wins at Mount Panorama. But I'm sure that you knew that he had a mountain bike accident and then broke his collarbone at the start of the season. And it just came out actually in the media that he did a test for BMW not long after, told them that he was absolutely fine, and he knew for a fact that he wasn't race ready. So he got through that, then had a stellar season, 14 race wins, and ended up wrapping up the championship on the weekend. But it was probably a bit of an anticlimax for him because I'm not sure if you saw many of the conditions or the race or anything, but it was under the lights on Saturday night, epic race. And then Sunday, it was actually declared a non-event because the weather was so treacherous, as you can expect here in Australia. So yeah, a bit of anticlimax for him, but his second championship, and yeah, he's just such an amazing driver, great person. I mean, I started my career in Supercars, so I've seen him up close and personal, and now obviously watching him from afar, he's just got such a good fight in him. And now he can just relax because he can go into Bathurst and just chill and know that there's no pressure and he's won the championship.
Can you ever go into Bathurst and just chill? Like, it's such a huge race. It's such a huge event.
Yeah, that is true. But also an epic weekend because it's the last time we're going to see Jamie Whincup racing. So it's good to see that Red Bull wrapped up their Constructors' Championship as well. But yeah, we've been watching Jamie for so many years. He's an absolute legend of the sport. So it'll be really nice to send him off at Bathurst, out of all places. They started there and they finished the season there.
What does Whincup's career mean now that we can actually look back on it, you know, and really start to weigh it up, all he's achieved, all he's done? Because obviously, he's not leaving the sport. He's now going to become Shane van Gisbergen's team boss, which might be interesting after the team orders squabble the other week. But, I mean, when we look back on the career of someone like Jamie Whincup, how do we place him in the pantheon of the all-time greats?
Yeah, I mean, you look at someone like a Peter Brock and now Jamie Whincup, it's just in this day and age, in those cars, they're not very easy to drive. I've sat in one before and I've seen what they do in those cars. It's been such a long career. He is an absolute legend of the sport, and to clock up that many championships, it's unbelievable. We won't see many people do it in a Supercars paddock. And of course, now there's some young talent in Brock Feeney stepping into his shoes, and he's going to have some really big shoes to fill.
Yeah, he absolutely is. Emma, I know you're over, all types of motor racing. I know you have your interest in your 2 wheels, in your 4 wheels, and of course your love for your home nation. I want to talk quickly about Oscar Piastri, who we spoke to just a little bit earlier in the show, actually. Lovely kid, reserve driver for Alpine next year. What's being made of him and his incredible ascent through the sport back home in Australia?
Oh, I mean, watching an Aussie on a grid of these championships of this caliber sitting back home is just unbelievable. And when they're doing well, it's even better, right? You're always going to support them no matter where they're on the grid. But 3 wins so far this year. He's already got, the F3 championship under his belt. He's on the way to surely win Formula 2 championship, fingers crossed. We've been talking about this youngster for a long time, 20 years of age. what he's been able to achieve so far. We obviously wanted to see him take that seat, that full-time last seat on the grid. Not meant to be, but I think he's just an absolute star. He's so humble. He's a great person. He's from Melbourne, actually.
He is.
Melbourne, Australia. Great place to live. And yeah, he's so great to watch. He's just an epic racer. And I know that he'll have such a long career ahead of him. Even though he's not in that full-time seat, I think where he's going to be next year is a great place to be.
Talking about where we're going to... Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, watching Formula One from Australia, being a Formula One fan is really difficult because, these crazy hours that we have to get up to watch these races, right? It's like 1 a.m., 4 a.m., we're setting alarms. So, yeah, definitely an avid Formula One fan watching on.
It's easier when we're actually there, and hopefully we will be there again next year. That's the plan. I know you're Melbourne based. How much excitement is there in the city of Melbourne to get things, not just get Formula One back, but get life back to normal? I know you guys have had it so hard the last year, 2 years now, but to get life back to normal, to get sport back, because sport is such a huge part of the culture in Melbourne.
Yeah, I mean, Melbourne is actually known as the sporting capital of Australia. Being locked down for so long, I think most times that I've chatted to you, you've been around the world working at Formula Ones, and we're still not able. International travel still has its real challenges over here. We're just coming out of it, which is great, but it's been really difficult to not be able to even. It hasn't been just about the restrictions in numbers and everything for these championships. It's actually been all the border restrictions, which is still in place. I mean, even Supercars, just to keep their calendar going for the year, was unbelievable, and they had to bring them all to one place and have back-to-back events there. And a lot of them have been away from their family for already 4 or 5 weeks. By the end of Bathurst, it'll be 7 weeks away from home, all the teams and the drivers. So it's a really big effort. But yeah, there's such a good vibe in the air now. We're starting to get out of it. We're starting to open up. They've had 2 years to get ready for this Formula One Grand Prix in Australia. So I can promise you it's going to be epic.
Looking back over this year then of motor racing, as I said, you report and you are a lover of such a wide range of motor racing, from MotoGP and World Superbikes through Supercars through Formula One. What's been your highlight of this season of racing?
Can I just say that that's a full-time job in itself, having to catch all this motorsport on a race weekend. I literally scheduled for myself. But, oh God, there's been so many highlights for us. I think, I love my four wheels. So obviously I've loved watching Formula One Championship this year. And the fact that there's a battle right to the end has been amazing. Having some motorsport happen again in our own backyard has obviously been sensational. But I think even just watching all the Aussies in Moto, I love my two wheels, as you said. So watching MotoGP for the 2022 season, we're actually going to have 3 Aussies in the MotoGP paddock. So Joel Kelso is joining Moto3. Remy Gardner won the Moto2 championship. And of course, Jack Miller is doing a stellar job on that Ducati in MotoGP. So I think watching on from afar and supporting these Aussies has been really amazing this year.
And he's going back to Australian Superbikes apparently for one race.
He is, yes. So Australian Superbikes, I have to mention, because that's the paddock that I used to work in. And again, for them, it's been really tough. They've managed 4 rounds. Their final round is at the Bend, which is a place that you have to visit, the Bend Motorsport Park, in just a few weeks' time. And Jack Miller, a lot of internationals and Jack Miller are actually heading there to race. So it's not like he needs a break, right? Let's just compete during my summer break. That's Jack.
Phenomenal. I love that it's your summer break, and for us it's getting into the dead of winter. Mate, so great to talk to you. I can't wait to see you in Melbourne next year. But I'm so chuffed you could find the time to come on the show and talk all things motor racing. I appreciate it, and I'm so glad you're getting out of lockdown back at home. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. See you in April.
Now it's that time of the show where I'd like to welcome a guest to the studio. And once again, it is my dear friend, Mr. Stuart Codling. Should we just keep that in? Let's just keep that in. Keep that in. Mr. Stuart Codling, Executive Editor of GP Racing Magazine. Hello, mate.
Hello, thank you for having me back. You've obviously forgotten about last time's disruption.
It was great fun. I've ruined it from the outset. What a weekend we had at Qatar. No one was expecting much overtaking. No one was expecting much of a race. And we got a race.
We did. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously it wasn't, a thriller minute Grand Prix. I must confess, I did pop off to make a cup of tea when it settled down. However, it did run contrary to expectations, didn't it? Everyone said, rubbish, no overtaking, maybe around the outside into turn one. But after the start, it will be an absolute nothing race. But once again, Formula One simulated the hell out of it, but there were variables. There was stuff about that circuit that they weren't expecting. The surface was smoother than expected. And once again, it came to tyres, which sadly is the story of pretty much every race, isn't it?
Interesting, though, that Mercedes in particular this week have said that if the curbs had been more harsh, it actually would have been slightly easier because the drivers would have no way gone near them.
Well, I can preside with a tiny bit of expertise over this because before becoming a motor racing journalist, or so-called journalist, as some people on social media might say, I did work on a car and motorbike magazine. And one of the reasons that I got into writing about other people doing stuff is that I shunted a Ducati massively to the extent that it landed on top of me in a ditch. So I know a bit about going around corners in a motorcycle. When you're going around a circuit on a motorcycle, and bearing in mind that the Qatar circuit was designed with MotoGP in mind, what you don't want is bumpy curbs, because bumpy curbs make for people going upside down and breaking their backs or worse. And so these curbs, they are, I wouldn't exactly call them smooth, but they're low so that a motorbike can go over them either with the knee sliders out or, as is the modern way of doing it, with the elbow down, and you basically get a gentle tap on the elbow or the knee rather than having said part of your anatomy ripped off. And that just encouraged the F1 drivers to push slightly further over the curbs than might otherwise have been advisable, as they do because they're looking for a fast lap time. So I think Mercedes' point was, if there was the equivalent of the dreaded sausage curb or something there that said, okay, right, this is your hard border, beyond which you cannot go, things would have been a bit better.
Talking about hard borders and obviously track limits changed session by session, new track, trying to find the limits, but there was a number of storylines over the course of the weekend as regards stewarding, and that really sort of a pullover from the Brazilian Grand Prix and the decision or non-decision to penalise Max Verstappen in Brazil. The decision to then penalise the yellow flag infringements here. We've got 2 rounds remaining in the season. Is it the case that in a season this close, these kind of decisions are always going to be microanalysed, overanalysed, and that sort of in an era of such intense sort of feverish or fevered fanaticism, you are never going to reach a point of global consensus?
No, because you can't please all the people all of the time. Yeah. And no doubt people who are in one fan camp or the other will be listening very carefully to what we say over the following minute or so, and will be deciding, they'll be weighing up the actual use and value of what we say according to how much we heap praise on their favourite driver or ordeal on their less favoured driver. But yeah, who would want to be the FIA race director? Certainly last Friday night, when he had to presumably sit down at the driver's briefing and say to people, well, that thing that we said was actually okay last weekend, play on, is not okay. Don't do it again. It just came over as a little bit ridiculous that the FIA kind of brushed the whole issue of what happened in Brazil under the carpet. I don't think that serves them very well. It left them a little bit open to criticism. But then what happened after that, with the yellow flags, I think at the end of the day, Christian Horner did cross a line when he started pointing fingers at marshals and talking about road marshals, because regardless of whether you agree with what they do or not, they are given a brief to react to what happens in front of them, and if they see a car in an unsafe position, then they wave their flags. That's their job. It's a job they're not paid for, that we should add, and they are highly expert at what they do. occasionally they might make mistakes. This is not for a competitor to say. It's certainly not for competitors to talk about rogue marshals.
Yeah, and it's never done with the intent of anything other than protecting the safety of the drivers out on track.
You know, Road Marshals just sounds like a rubbish direct-to-video movie from the 1990s, doesn't it? It's possibly starring Jean-Claude Van Damme or something.
Yeah, or another Star Wars spin-off.
Yeah, or an ageing Steven Seagal in fat mode, perhaps.
Listen, we have 2 races left. This is really turning into, well, it's not turning into, it's continuing to be, just for me anyway, a season for the ages. You've had a car in that Red Bull RB16B that has had few perceptible weak points throughout the season, a Mercedes which has increasingly come on song. Yes, it had that fresh power unit in the back of it in Brazil. They didn't use that in Qatar. They still have the spicy engine, as Toto puts it, for the final 2 races at 2 tracks, one of which is completely new, one of which is heavily redesigned from the last time we were there. Do we have a favourite going in? Do we have any inkling of how this will play out, or is it really sort of, you know, level playing field all to play for?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because this season really has confounded expectations, hasn't it? We've seen circuits where you expected Red Bull to prosper, all of a sudden Mercedes and the only explanation the Red Bull principals can reach for is that Mercedes have got a flexible rear wing or a special spicy engine or whatever, whereas possibly there are other factors at play. It is certainly looking that with the fresh engine that's only being used in Brazil, Lewis should prosper at the new circuit in Saudi Arabia, because it's looking like a high-speed circuit. The circumstances do seem to favour the Mercedes. And then what happens when we go to Abu Dhabi? It could be a circuit transformed. It could just be a lipstick on a pig job. Who knows?
The final part of all of this, I think, has to be the form that Lewis Hamilton has shown over the last 2 weekends, ever since being thrown to the back of the grid, getting disqualified in qualifying. We've both reported on Lewis since he arrived in Formula One. We've seen him fight for championships time and time again. We always talk about how strong he is in the second half of the season. Can we both also agree that when you put his back up against the wall, there are few drivers who come out swinging quite as decisively?
Definitely. And we've seen year in, year out, he had what, one season where he wobbled, 2010, 2011, had a weird mid-season wobble, personal life woes. But generally speaking, he's someone who is able to build his game year on year. And we've seen teammates come and go who've really struggled to match him on track, off track. Toto Wolff said, you know, they've unleashed the lion. You know, when Lewis was put to the back of the grid in Brazil, as you say, he came out swinging, and it was decisive that weekend. If he comes to win this World Championship, we probably will look at Brazil at the turning point, you know, from the back of the grid all the way to the front again through the course of the weekend. It's a work of genius.
It's going to, it was a work of genius. If Max Verstappen wins this title, you can't take away from him what a job he's done this season, what performance that he's put in to beat a Lewis Hamilton in this kind of form. Similarly, if Lewis manages to pull this back now and win an 8th title, does it go down as one of his best? I think for either one of these guys, we need to be rightly lauding them for the incredible achievement that winning such a close championship will merit.
Yeah, whoever wins this World Championship will thoroughly deserve it. It won't be like if, God forbid, Eddie Irvine had won the World Championship in 1999. That would have been ghastly. Both drivers have faced off against one another, each one arguably at the peak of their form. So whoever comes out on top will be a deserved winner, simply because they have faced one of the greatest drivers of their generation absolutely at their peak. And we're talking about drivers who are several years apart. Old generation Lewis, he's 36 now. He's someone in a different space in his career from Max, who's very young, coming into it, desperate to win his first world title. So it's a battle for the ages, I think.
Can you call it with 2 races to go? With so many years of experience, and from all we've seen and all we know of both these drivers, and just of how Formula One World Championships tend to play out, can you?
No.
And that's great, isn't it?
Yeah. As the late Murray Walker put it, Formula One is if backwards. Now,
Yeah.
if we were to quibble, we'd say actually it's one F backwards. But Murray always used to say, expect the unexpected. Oh no, hang on a minute, that was the beginning of Thunderbirds or something. But you never really know what's going to happen because there are so many variables, and there are those of us who like to pontificate and predict in advance what's going to happen. And we saw last weekend how just coming to a new circuit can completely upset whatever expectations, whatever baggage you bring to it. You can assume that things are going to fall a certain way, but in Formula One, stuff just happens and things you don't expect crop up. So while you do get races where you can nip out and make yourself a cup of tea and fetch a biscuit, go to the loo or whatever, there are other races that are riveting from start to finish when you might not have expected them to be, and that's the beauty of Formula One.
It's going to be a great finale to the season. Thanks for your wisdom, as always, mate. I believe that you have an exciting evening ahead going to watch the final episode of Blake 7.
Well, apart from this programme, of course, there is another unmissable piece of television tonight, which is 9 p.m. Forces TV, the last ever episode of Blake 7. I will not give any spoilers to your avid viewers.
Never seen an episode. I need to get on that, don't I? I'm sorry. Thanks for coming on the show, mate.
It is lovely to be here, Will. Thanks for having me.
Never a dull moment with Codders in the studio. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. That is pretty much all we've got time for. Things we learnt today. Oscar Piastri will be putting full focus on his sim work for the Alpine F1 team next year as he takes a year out from racing to fully embed himself with the F1 squad. Of course, not before he hopes nailing down the F2 title for 2021. Alexander Rossi would love to do the Dakar. He will contest the Baja 1000 in the Stadium Supertruck at some point, but again, his full focus right now is on winning that IndyCar title. Good news from Australia, as it seems that everything is coming out of lockdown and getting back to normal. Speaking to Emma, absolute joy, and really looking forward to getting back there next year. And from Stuart, actually we didn't learn it from the interview, but beforehand I showed him a video on social media, on YouTube's, and Stuart is very, very excited about Rick Astley singing the Smiths' greatest hits. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's quite the thing. That's it, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of This Week. I think we've only got one show left for the rest of the year. Is that right, guys? That is right, isn't it? Yeah, only one show left for the rest of the year, which is coming your way in December. A bumper episode where we will look back over the Formula One season and the very best of all the championships that we've covered this year. For now, though, folks, that is it. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the next episode of This Week.